Listen Lanarkshire is a community radio station governed by the registered charity Getting Better Together Limited. Therefore, the radio station itself retains political neutrality, and any political views or comments aired as part of political discussion programming or otherwise are not the views of Listen Lanarkshire, nor of Getting Better Together Limited. The station has a set of key commitments found on the Ofcom website, and we adhere to all necessary Ofcom rules. For more information or inquiries, please contact us at radio@shotshealthyliving.com.
Hello and welcome back to What's the Point? It might be blowing a gale outside, David, but it's certainly going to be even windier with your chat tonight, because quite simply we need to talk plainly, because Audit Scotland has said in careful language what residents already know. North Lanarkshire Council is facing a £136.9 million budget shortfall over the next 5 years, and that's after a 10% council tax rise. That alone tells you the current approach, isn't it?
Working,
David, that's exactly where we are. Audit Scotland doesn't exaggerate, so when it says a strategic shift is now essential, well, that's not spin, that's a warning. And this is where responsibility sits at the top. Audit Scotland confirms that the council's programme of work, the document that sets priorities, spending and direction, was heavily influenced by officers, with elected councillors largely limited to an approval role. 6 strategic boards, all chaired by senior officers, now drive transformation. That structure doesn't appear by accident. It exists because political leadership allows it, oversees it, and ultimately owns it. Yes, Jim, our very own El Presidente, has now been finally found out for falling asleep at the wheel, and we're not talking about a school bus, David. And where is he? Poof, again, like a puff of smoke. He's away. So, good people in North Lanarkshire, what have we got a show for you tonight? So, we have 243 transformational projects, yet Audit Scotland confirms the council cannot currently evidence the benefit they deliver. No project level tracking, no clear link to closing the budget gap. Just very clear here, when the council talks, just to be very clear, David, because I'm not going to mince my words.
Yep.
When the council talks about transformation, it's talking about schools, town hubs and place-based regeneration. Those projects may have value, but Audit Scotland says the council can't yet prove what benefits they deliver. And even officers admit they don't fix the budget problem. And at the same time, performance is sliding. Last year, 42% of indicators declined. Public satisfaction fell across nearly 3/4 of measures. And since the baseline year, which was that amazing 92% satisfaction rate that North Lanarkshire Council recorded for every resident in the authority, well, that's deteriorated practically completely. So, adult social work is flagged as a major weakness, environmental services are declining, culture and leisure are going backwards. This isn't about individual officers, David. It's about leadership models that stepped back for strategic control and left accountability blurred. So again, Jim, as Delia Smith in that famous video for Norwich City pronounced,
where are you? Where are you? Let's be having you! Come on!
where are you? Where are you, Jim? Jim, let's be having you, because ultimately, David, these responsibilities fall to a man on £66,000 per year to show political leadership, and that is currently missing. And by the way, Audit Scotland picks up on that as well, but we'll come on to that. We'll definitely come on to it. But anyway, for those good listeners at home, that is a wee bit of an extended monologue, I do appreciate. But Audit Scotland has been polite. They're not actually coming out and saying exactly what all the key problems are here, David. Nope. They're doing it in legalese words and highlighting the fact that North Lanarkshire Council right now must change course, because ultimately the political leadership is non-existent. So, Tonight, the question isn't whether the report is critical, it is the question is why political leadership continues to defend a system that the National Auditor now says needs fundamental change. And fundamental change is our key word. And that's what we're getting into. So tonight, I am joined by the part-timer himself, because our other pal, it was too windy for him to come out the house tonight. It's the Wishy Magoo himself. How are you, David Crichton?
I'm very well, but I'm exhausted listening to that introduction.
Well, Davey, I had to get it out because that Audit Scotland report excited me. It excited me so much that I had a flurry that I had to share it with all our listeners. Now, the other thing is as well, David, we are joined by the Belsey Hall bowler himself, but unfortunately tonight he can't be here in person because he's a big sweetie wife and he'll just no leave the house, but we'll get him on the phone, so that's the way we're going to have to take him on board tonight, and I'm sure he's got a lot to say in relation to the Audit Scotland report.
We're phoning the Bells Hill hotline
you
as we speak,
the Bells Hill hotline,
and we'll
right
see
now
whether we can get Councillor Brennan and whether he's managed to sell a bigger pair of shoes that roots himself to the ground.
Big shoe claim.
I think he's maybe there. Are you there, Mr. Brennan?
I am indeed.
There you go.
No.
Jerry, welcome to the show tonight. I appreciate it's too windy and rainy for you to join us in person.
I wouldn't want my hair getting blown out.
Do you know something? That's what it says. You could have wore a headscarf, but anyway, you're still here, which is unlike our other guest who gets a sniffle and he'll look for any reason not to attend. But anyway, both of yous are welcome.
Serious bout of man flu.
Tonight, Jerry, we are going to be talking all things Audit Scotland. So let's kick it off, David. Where do you want to start?
Oh, geez, where do you start? So, for the listeners, you've covered an awful lot that's there, but there's two papers, isn't there? There's a shortened version, which is North Lanarkshire Best Value paper that's there. And then on top of that, there's a much far-reaching, far wider stretching annual audit report. Now, these are reports that are compiled by Audit Scotland,
which will be available on our Facebook page and social media channels, because I think it's important that we share that information with folk.
Well, they're on the Audit Scotland website as well, so if you really feel inclined, go on to Audit Scotland, search for North Lanarkshire documents, it's there, and you will see the 2024-25 audit report, and it's about 62 pages long. So you've got these two documents that overlap slightly, but in effect cover an awful lot of ground that's there, some of which you've done in your intro. One of the biggest phrases, if nobody takes anything else away from this, is that there is an identified need, a significant strategic shift in North Lanarkshire's current planning to be able to continue to provide services for the next 5 years. Now that's quite a significant statement for an external auditor to make. And the other one that kind of jumped out to me, page 10, if anybody's really want to read the report, is how heavily officer-led the decisions North Lanarkshire Council is. And that we can talk about as you go forward, because you've got to remember the democratic process is such.
Well, we're going to come on to that in a separate issue.
The councillors are there to fulfil a role, but just now we both know that's not been allowed to happen.
Non-existent, because our El Presidente has declared that the Duma no longer accepts democratic discourse. Well done, El Presidente.
There you go.
To you.
Didn't know whether you get any of that, Mr. Brennan, or not, or whether you want to contribute.
Well, I will contribute as things go on. I'm just trying to locate the report itself. I had it not that long ago and it's gone. One of the key aspects, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit at the edge, is the astronomical increase in the size of the budget shortfall that we're expected to anticipate over the next 5 years. So the budget shortfall this year is projected to be around 13 million, and over the next 5 years we are expected to see an increase in that of over 1,000%, close to 1,100% in that budget shortfall, and that budget shortfall should be looking at £140 million.
Now don't exaggerate, Jerry. 139.7 I think was the actual number.
136.9.
See, I mean he's just prone to exaggeration, but you carry on, Sid.
The numbers are
eye-watering. Jerry, here's a question.
Something. Hold on, Craig. Sorry, I know it's going to be difficult to because I can't tell you shut up with my eyes when I'm across the table from you. But you mentioned a significant shift, and it seems that if we're going to be, moving from a budget shortfall of 13 million to 140 million in such a short space of time, that shift needs to take place immediately.
So, the question I have for you, Brennan, is the budget model as it stands currently at present, based on the Audit Scotland report, is it broken?
It's certainly, if it's not broken, it's certainly in need of major repair.
Now,
I think that's as politically neutral as I could be on that.
The point that we have to make here is this year in February we will expect another 10% council tax rise, which still leaves £137 million black hole still to come. So really, in effect, again, if we start to look at it and look at these transformational projects, is this really the best way for us to start looking at what our expenditure is? Is that something that we need to really rethink?
You look at some of these figures, and we've said before about reserves. And reserves basically is obviously monies that are kept back for specific reasons for council, and some of that's financially prudent and some of it's strategic and everything else. But the quoted figure just now that North Lanarkshire have on reserve is 346 million.
Yep.
So it's one of the highest reserve figures within Scottish local authorities across the 32 that's there. Now the argument will be that I think it's something like 262 million of that on paper has been earmarked for inflationary pressures and things that the council...
rises, various other things,
the council are factoring in, which is absolutely
perhaps
correct and
senior
prudent
manager retirements, and
you've also got to factor that in, that's for sure. So, but you've still got, there was mention of that in the audit report as well.
There was mention of that in the audit report. I'm coming on to that. Why are you still on the budget just now?
But the budget stuff is that there was mention that there has to be a review in the basis and the way that North Lanarkshire are attributing these reserves, council reserves, and it's always in the focus of making sure that they're maintaining a service that's there, and there's also got to be a balanced budget, and there's got to be financial, prudence and everything else that's involved in it. But 346 million, 260 odd million a year,
sustainable.
It's like you just kind of think. The other figure that's here, and I know you want to get to it as well, that even in terms of capital programme funding, from 24 to 25, is that we borrowed another £100 million in a year to keep these projects going. Now, they throw these figures about as though that's like 10% of the overall general fund budget that we have just borrowed in the space of 12 months to provide this, and yet we're not given details as to how much that's actually going to cost, what are the interest repayments, and over what kind of term that's involved. So what is that actually going to cost the people in North Lanarkshire? Well,
before we move away for the whole budget process, I want to read out the exact wording in the Audit Scotland report. A strategic shift is now essential. Now, that isn't a routine wording, David. No. That wouldn't be expected in an Audit Scotland report. No. Basically doing a health check on how healthy your council is. And it's a bit bizarre that they're saying a strategic shift. Now, you've given me a lovely segue then into the whole transformation projects. So now we get into that. Now, an unproven, unevidenced part of that report in there stipulates that officers themselves can identify the benefits in relation to these town hub, community hub models. So ultimately we've borrowed 100 million on what? On an idea. Is that basically?
That's just an additional 100 million. That's not a total. That's just in the last 12 months we've borrowed this.
So the projects don't track benefits. They don't track benefits at a project level, and will not close the budget gap. Even officers have identified that. So the external spending on these projects are transformational. The level of funds that's being spent on them is not going to close a budget gap. Surely you would spend to save rather than spending. Clearly it looks to me now is in the back of a fag packet because it's nice new shiny buildings.
You've got to always balance it. I mean, we know there's difference between revenue and expenditure and capital and all this kind of stuff that's there, and some of it's ring fenced and some of it can only be spent in certain means that are there. But in very crude terms, you've got to take, when somebody like Audit Scotland says that you have to take a strategic shift in your planning to make sure that services can continue to be provided to 2029, 2030, is that you've got to look at that and think, what is it that we are doing that could be different, that could ensure these services are there, and are we getting the value for money? If we're projecting that we're going from a £13 million deficit just now that we're asked to make cuts for, but in rolling that forward in 5 years' time, and Jerry will come back in these 1,000 and odd percent that's there, to 139 million, they're staggering numbers.
Now, some cynics out there will say that that's the worst case scenario projection. That is the worst case scenario projection. We've never reached these detrimental figures, yet the leader of the council came out in a press article in a couple of weeks' time to attack the SNP because of budget shortfalls, and it will be the worst case situation. So who do we believe in this? What do we look at when it comes to this budget shortfall? Because I think I'll take Audit Scotland's word on it.
I think when you've got an organisation like Audit Scotland, and let's be fair, Audit Scotland appoint as external auditors to North Lanarkshire Council. So, and we've met with the individual at Audit Scotland who is the external auditor for North Lanarkshire Council.
That was in relation to the £1.8 billion Mears contract,
it was
wasn't
indeed.
it?
We met with him to discuss that at length. But it's if you get an organisation like that that's expressing some concerns, and it's not, let's be fair, it's not all absolutely doom and gloom. There are some highlights in there on the basis that North Lanarkshire are achieving some of the highlights and some of the points that they set out in the plan for North Lanarkshire. So if you look at the overall picture that's there, you know, if you try to take a balanced approach, but sometimes when you hear phrases like that from a regulator, it must make you sit up. The other thing, of course, is that this paper, the shortened paper that's there, is being presented on Thursday of this week, and there'll be senior management, obviously, from North Lanarkshire Council have to attend that meeting. Now, I've never witnessed it, but effectively it's talking about giving evidence on the basis of the external auditor's report as to best value and some of the concerns that they've got from there. So that'll be a really interesting meeting on Thursday as to the questions that are posed and the answers that are given by the senior management team at the council. And they may well be able to defend, you know, some of the stuff that are of concern within that report.
So what I would encourage is for anybody at all interested, it'll be on our social media pages tonight as well. You can go into Facebook or any other platform that we're on. We'll post a link up and you can register your interest to attend that meeting, because I would wholly encourage every resident in North Lanarkshire to attend that, because ultimately that's where you're seeing your hard-earned council tax money is going to and how it's currently being spent. There'll be a raft of questions that people have, and as I said again, hopefully that process can answer some of them. That would be the most important point. Jerry, do you have anything you want to add to it? Because I know you've got the Audit Scotland document in front of you now, so it's time for your stato.
I've opened it up and had a kind of brief look at it. I think one of the things that listeners probably want to know is that every year, and not just once a year, like throughout the year, officers of the council will meet with elected members and go through the budget scenarios, if you like. And each year the officers will present an optimistic scenario, an envisaged scenario, and a pessimistic scenario. So I'm going to suggest that the scenario that's been presented to Audit Scotland is the pessimistic.
I would agree with that.
And the closer we get to year 5, if you like, of this budget setting time frame that Audit Scotland are looking at, the council themselves, the leaders, the politicians, will more than likely, when it's either the envisaged or the optimistic
appraisal
figure that is presented as the real figure, they will claim that it's been their own prudent management. It's been prudent management by this Labour Tory administration, supported by,
propped up by the SNP and some independents on the payroll. Definitely.
And they'll claim that that King, the president has come in his big white horse, and he has saved the council from financial ruin.
So
I suspect that there's a bit of smoke and mirror behind that. Not at all to be critical of officers. Officers must present what they believe to be the worst case scenario.
100%.
And in this case, I think that's what they've done. But
the financial strategy for the council is seriously lacking, because again, I'll come back to that a strategic shift is now essential. So you can't mince the words. You can't.
I think that
they are. I don't think I've read in any annual report
ever
such as this where a shift, because it suggests a couple of things. It suggests that the direction's potentially wrong, or that there are factors, external or internal factors, or unknown factors between last year and this, that have interrupted what would have been a smooth journey from one place to the other. Either something has happened, or we're going in the wrong direction.
Well, I think that leads us nicely on to a point, and the point being is political leadership, has it lost control of the strategy? Is that where we are now? Because it's an approval role elected members have now. It's not a shaping priorities role in North Lanarkshire Council. And the way the council was designed, strategically designed by El Presidente, is to have the officer shield that can always be rallied out anytime anybody tries to perform any democratic scrutiny. So ultimately what we have in there is it really a case that Jim has now lost the reins in regards to what direction is already set in the council? Because if you give away all your power under delegated authority, then who's making the decisions? Because I'm really struggling now to understand who is it is making the decisions, because all I ever see is committee papers for noting or approval. I don't see any scrutiny being performed.
No, I'll answer that one first. I've spoken about this many times. I've spoken about it, publicly at council and here on this podcast. But our ability as elected members to scrutinise the business of the council is virtually nil. Virtually nil.
Well, now it's been justified by Audit Scotland, because they've confirmed the council is heavily officer-led. Heavily officer-led.
As far as I'm concerned. And I personally feel that as an elected member, I'm used as a nodding device.
Yes.
For proposals to go through in reports, whether they're produced by officers or other individuals. The ability to scrutinise decisions, financial decisions in particular, are often not even made available to members of North Lanarkshire Council, and the electorate need to be aware
100%,
of this.
100%.
There's a huge, big, fat, meaty document called the scheme, the delegated authority of officers of the council to act without even having to inform councillors that they are going about spending council money, or authorising payments, or making legal agreements to settle cases. Often
we're coming on to out of court settlements, Jerry. We're coming on to all that. Don't get ahead of me. Don't get ahead of me. So an analogy.
I'll finish just by saying that the press should never be the first place that an elected member hears about issues relating to our council.
And out of court settlements.
Out of court settlements.
Yeah,
indeed.
I agree.
I woke up to one on Monday morning.
What was that one?
On Monday morning. That was the one on the news about the case where the parent was unhappy about.
Oh, so it was, an out of court settlement in relation to the social work case and the adoption. Yeah, that's correct.
So I wake up to that on Monday morning. Absolutely nothing from the leader of the council just as a courtesy, a heads up to say.
Where's Wally's got nothing on El Presidente. he can vanish, but I'll tell you what, if the Civic Centre menu changes, he'll definitely be down there with our own sausage in hand for a quick press photo op, and that's probably how we need to start tackling and trying to convert the old missing Jim Logue and get them out into the public in the open. Jerry, 6 strategic boards are chaired by chief officers. They control the delivery of transformation. That was what was mentioned in this Audit Scotland report as well. So the council is being ran through officer boards, not democratic debate, and that's a leadership choice. So again, coming back to, and it sounds as if we're bashing Jim tonight, I'll be honest.
Absolutely not.
I think for the position that we've raised for nearly a year and a bit now, is the lack of leadership that currently exists, political leadership within North Lanarkshire Council. And again, out of court settlements, they wasn't there. 180 odd bill, what was it, £1.8 billion Mears contract. It was nowhere to be seen. In addition to that, we had all the other stuff, school buses, community centre closures, and this is the reason why your community centres were potentially at threat, because he knew coming down the road the council was going to be in a shortfall of over 190 or 149 million, whatever it may be. So again, we end up in the position here that delegated authority kind of is his get out of jail card, David. So he's gave away his powers. It's not really me doing it, Jack. It's like leaving the Wayne in charge of the cooker and telling them to make a dinner while you go out for an hour and you come back and your house is burnt down. Who do you blame in that?
But then somebody's got to take responsibility for that. So if you give away the delegated authority powers, which Jim Logue's administration has done, and systematically done, so you've now got a situation in council where councillors try to raise issues based on scrutiny and policy and everything else that's there, and if you're not thrown out the chamber, then you're told that your amendment or your motion or anything else that's put forward for discussion is incompetent. You can't actually discuss it. And the best example of that, this is now going to be the second full council meeting. So they have them every 2 to 3 months, effectively, where 77 councillors that have been elected across North Lanarkshire sit in the chamber, supposedly debate the real business and issues of the day. The last full council meeting lasted less than 9 minutes.
6 minutes it was.
6 minutes.
6 minutes.
This one that is planned for the 18th of December,
4.5, we're going for a record.
I reckon it'll be 4.5 to 5 minutes.
4.5.
And that is the biggest and saddest indictment that you've got of political leadership that can exist anywhere in a Scottish council. That you think that it's okay to produce an agenda for 77 elected members to turn up.
But why is that? Why do you think that is?
Well, you know why it is, because any motions or stuff that you put forward to the provost get quashed, so they don't go forward.
Because you're using strategic
because you're actually
scrutiny.
want to discuss stuff
that's really important.
Right.
So that we don't end up in a position where we're raising people's council tax by 10%.
Can I read you the motion that I put to council in October that was refused?
Jerry.
Just to put this in context, the council agrees to the establishment of an officer member working group to develop and implement a full review of the scheme of delegation to officers.
And that was refused. Well, I'm coming on to a cheeky wee amendment that went in relation to their governance review, which we're going to be coming on to in a minute as well. But the point here is, as I said, who is responsible? Do we place the blame in relation to how the council is currently deteriorating and getting into a cul-de-sac of madness and nonsense at the door of Jim Logue? Because ultimately he is the political leader in North Lanarkshire.
Yep.
It's his Labour group that have the controlling number. They pay for support for the leader of the SNP, and they pay for support in the Tory coalition with Sandy Watson getting an enhanced payment and the funny one, the position of convener for audit and scrutiny, which is absolutely hilarious to me. But again, these individuals are paid to do that role. Now, coming on to the rest and the remainder of the report, before I do, I'm going to read out a couple of questions that I've received so far. Who is lending NLC the £100 million? Do you know, Jerry?
It's not me.
It's certainly not me, and I don't think it's the Provy woman.
No.
So
effectively it'll be different borrowing. They'll spread that over different terms and over different lending vehicles or instruments, as they're called.
Bright House?
Well, it could be, but more importantly, when you throw about this 100 million over a year, is that there should be. Why don't we know what that is going to cost the council, and over what term? Where is the fiduciary kind of expertise to have a look at it and think, well, okay, If we're going to borrow 100 million, what are we going to get for it? What's it going to cost for us, and over how long? I mean, this is basic stuff. People buy houses and rent and all that kind of stuff. These are calculations that they have to do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and you're getting put up council tax by another 10% because this guy can't manage his job in relation to being the political leader of the council.
I think we're at the situation now that there has been so much delegated authority and power that has moved from the chamber to council officers, and council officers effectively is that they've got the expertise, they've got the experience and stuff that's there. But by the same token,
I think we need to be honest about this as well. So mechanisms exist for a council officer to challenge an elected member. If an elected member says or does something that an officer, I think people need to know the imbalance of power that currently exists. Yeah. So tonight, for talking sake, I'm sure there'll be a number of officers eagerly listening to any words that come out my mouth for the potential of a Standards Commission complaint again. So in effect, what we have is an imbalance in the system. We have senior management can easily take out complaints in regards to an elected member, and that holds credibility because the Standards Commission for Scotland is set up to always side with the officer class, whereas an elected member does not have the same provision. That provision does not exist, so there's no balance. The balance, and I'm not looking for confrontation, but the point of it being is if that balance and political balance is no in existence, well, where would the other route be? You would expect as chief mediator or negotiator in that process would be your leader of the council. But again, he's non-existent. He's quite happy to delegate the authorities, so the lunatics have took over the asylum.
Well, one of the questions that we've been asked before, and effectively we've been asked again, is that can this delegated authority be reversed?
Yes.
Yes, it can.
100%.
100%
as long as there's
it
political
can.
will.
But where does the political lie?
You're not going to get it off of somebody who's getting an extra 10 grand to be the opposition leader.
You ain't going to get that.
I'm going to set out a scenario for you, right? This is a fictitious scenario.
Absolutely fictitious.
Just fictitious, right? So there's no truth to this at all, but it could well happen. Officers of North Lanarkshire Council could make a decision, and a obscenely bad decision, right? And that decision could be made on powers that were delegated to them years ago, right? And normally the leader of the council would carry the can for that desperately bad decision. But the reality is that even the leader of the council might not know about that desperately bad decision that was made by officers, because often there is no reason for them to tell them about it. So terribly bad decisions can be made by officers without recourse, and the leader of the council maybe not know about it, and elected members like me and
but that's his get out. That's his get out. He doesn't know about that. That would be hypothetically his get out.
Isn't it? That's always it. So you can see exactly the way that it's set up. It's set up so that occasionally there is some wriggle room for elected members, especially leaders of administration.
If I was a listener, not involved in the political shenanigans and madness that exists in North Lanarkshire Council, right? The question I would be asking myself is A, how much is it going to cost me? Because all it does is go up all the time and I don't get any additionality for it. Right? That would be the first thing I'd ask. Second question I would be asking in this as well is, if it's a case that I'm electing a councillor to be a councillor in North Lanarkshire and they are politically mute because they don't have a say in anything at all, they're basically castrated for the minute that they walk in the door, then really in effect, where is the scrutiny going to come from? Because ultimately, if you're sitting in that debating chamber and you raise a point, let's take for salt's sake, give me a point in this report. There's so much in this report. I shuffle through my papers, David, because there's
child
loads. There is loads to get through. Adult health and social care. Let's get to that.
Let's go there.
What number's that, Greg? Just for the readers at home.
I'll get to it in a minute. Just let me read my point first. Right, so adult health and social care. Only 18% of adult social work indicators sit in the top 2 national quartiles. So, declining satisfaction has been flagged repeatedly, including the earlier best value reviews. And this is not a new problem, it's a long-running failure that still hasn't been fixed.
We've got a situation, right? So within this document as well, and I know we're getting quite technical numbers and a lot of stuff flying about, but within this document, and North Lanarkshire kind of adhere to it, is that there is a 28-point health check indicator, it's called.
Have we got a copy of the indicators?
I have actually got a
Do you?
but
Did
not,
you get a copy of the indicators?
it took me quite a wee while to find it, and it's
'Cause I've
graphs.
never been provided
It's graphs
them.
and chat. Oh no, I didn't get it from North Lanarkshire. I had to go digging for it. So there's this 28-point health check indicators that's there, and that's referred to within this Audit Scotland document as well. But it covers a whole raft of things, and I think it said that there was something like 52% of these indicators had moved forward since 2019. So that basically half that has moved forward, not been resolved, not wonderful or anything different. They had moved forward on that basis. It's there. But here's the thing, that you look at the ones that are not, we've got declining or actually increasing child poverty above the national average in North Lanarkshire Council.
Yeah.
That's a serious concern for me. You have reported crime on the increase within North Lanarkshire Council. You have the employment stats don't marry up. So these are really crucial, important ones that the people in North Lanarkshire are saying, well, wait a minute, I want my kids as well-being and as well-educated and the best position that they can be possibly, and yet we're failing them. But we're still building hubs.
Oh, listen,
We're still doing stuff. We're still paying pensions to people.
Road to Damascus.
And I know that we're coming there, but we're still quite happy to spend the public purse to the tune of £585,000 towards two people's pension retirement funds. Let me get onto that just when you get onto it at some point this year, because you were excited at the beginning. By God, let's go to that.
Let's go there now. Let's talk about senior management pension pots who have all vacated to the tune of about £1 million. It's only two that we know about, two £500,000 payments to a senior finance manager and an IT manager within the council that were chief officers. Yet in Glasgow, let's do the comparison. The local press were absolutely furious in Glasgow, covering that story continuously, so much so the SNP forced a review and made sure that elected members were, now remember it's an SNP controlled council, but elected members were part of that process. All political persuasions were aligned that should never have happened, and again the critique and the kick up in relation to that subject matter is still ongoing just now. It's still there.
But as a result of that, there was 5 chief officers left at that point, including the CEO at Glasgow City Council, and effectively the scrutiny that they were then put under after, and it's after the event, this is the issue. These things don't come forward to they should do, they don't come forward to councillors to scrutinise the basis as to whether it's best value, whether it's morally correct, and whether it sits right with the council.
Well, if the skills gap can be filled, that's the most important bit, because the loss of service.
Scotland have brought up, they've highlighted the basis to say this didn't meet the criteria for scrutiny. They couldn't. The actual amount, going back to North Lanarkshire Council, 2 individuals that's there, forget about the redundancy package, the tax-free lump sums and the pension benefits. They're contractual, they're in there, and effectively they're based on what you earned, what you paid, what you put into the scheme and all that kind of stuff. That's totally separate. The issue that you've got to look at is that for 2 individuals alone, between them, £585,000 of what they call additional strain fund was paid by North Lanarkshire Council to the local government pension scheme to ensure that these 2 folks could leave with the absolute maximum benefits in terms of their pension, tax-free lump sum and severance pay. Now, without that £585,000 being paid by the council of public monies, then the figures would have been less. So when North Lanarkshire were challenged on this back in July, the response was, if you're a high earner, you can pay into it, you get a huge pot of money and you deserve that's absolutely fine. That's not the issue. The issue is that senior officers took the decision that £585,000 was best spent to make sure these 2 people left with the enhanced package that they got, and yet Audit Scotland in their report have come back and said, well, actually, we can't see that best value for money. We can't see the documentation that proves that decision was proper, both for the council and the money that's been spent on the people in North Lanarkshire Council. Furthermore, that decision to be able, because it's a discretionary decision that's there, is taken by 4 people.
So 4 people sit around a table and decide whether or no somebody's going to get a massive lump
Have
sum.
the discretionary ability.
None of them could possibly have been recipients, though, because that would be a
You would think, Jerry. You would think. Here we go. The 4 senior officers that are delegated that power to be able to make these discretionary decisions without
Councillor oversight
or scrutiny is the chief exec, deputy chief exec, finance officer,
who was one of the individuals
that retired.
No way.
And the legal and democratic officer.
So the monitoring officer, who's the other person that retired?
No, not the current monetary officer.
The previous
monetary officer.
Who also
so you've
retired.
Got 4 people in senior positions who have that discretion.
Wow.
To operate within the scheme rules to make these payments. They didn't bring this forward. Let's remember, this is stuff that was hidden until Tom Gordon effectively reported it in the Herald, who got it through a Freedom of Information request to say, hey, wait a minute,
doesn't it look right?
Sorry, this looks a wee bit like Glasgow
Surely
City
local
Council.
press covered
but
this.
Again, it goes further. Sorry, Jerry, I know you want to come back in.
Press covered that.
I'm actually reading this this section, David. It's actually point 58 and point 59 in this report, and it's under.
Yes, it is.
It's helpfully
57 to 59.
Headed exit packages so that people will know.
Now, remember, Jerry, these characterisations will only be recognised by senior management within the council. So are we very, very clear that this is in the Audit Scotland report?
But the Audit Scotland report goes on because effectively I kind of got further details during the course of the day. Is that Audit Scotland actually there's a separate this paper you haven't got. This was effectively an Audit Scotland comment made back to an auditor that's there, and effectively Audit Scotland actually said that their concern was that this is not the first time in Scottish local government that these things have happened. With no
within
scrutiny.
North Lanarkshire.
They didn't mention North Lanarkshire specifically. They mentioned across basically the authorities. But it wasn't the first time, and that they were seriously concerned that yet again it was happening, most recently in Glasgow and then with North Lanarkshire Council.
That might suggest that there's possibly an issue with internal policy. And what they actually said, so auditors found that it was not always clear how the council had considered whether alternative options to early retirement would have been A, feasible, and B, represented better value for money. From discussions with officers, auditors understand that while alternatives were considered, they would not have been suitable and were therefore documented as not applicable. Auditors also concluded there was scope for greater transparency with elected members on the wider implications and risks of the proposed restructure, particularly around the potential for associated early retirement costs. And in closing, they said that they recommended the council enhances the standard of its documentation of early retirement decisions and review its policies and procedures to ensure that exit packages for senior officers are subject to additional scrutiny. Now, that additional scrutiny can only come from elected members, one would imagine.
Unless you're retiring and you're sitting on the panel. Because ultimately, let's look at on about it, if I was a good person in North Lanarkshire, would I want to sit on my retirement panel deciding the money that I'm going to be getting? You're damn right I would. Yeah, listen, it's a great gig if you can get it.
You know, the good news, Greg, the good news is that the council plans to address this as part of a upcoming governance review.
Oh, Jerry, you just take me sweetly into the governance review, because one of the key recommendations coming from Audit Scotland was that the council has to conduct a governance review of how it currently conducts its business and its engagement with elected members. I will quote Audit Scotland, and Audit Scotland says that this council is now heavily, to quote their words, heavily officer-led. So, the governance review was launched at the last policy and strategy meeting, where on the 25th of September, whereby a paper appeared saying governance review, and it was a paper presented and produced by the Chief Officer of Legal and Democratic Services.
To hand out the amendment, please, and Mark, could you ensure that all members who join online have access to item 9, the review of the Council's Democratic Committee and decision-making governance procedures. I've been advised that Councillor Lennon, in accordance with Standing Order 25, has submitted an amendment. Can I ask committee services to hand out the amendment, please? And Mark, could you ensure that all members who join online have access to the amendment as well?
And that was the meeting, Jerry, if you recall, that I submitted an amendment to that because I had grave concerns that there was no co-production. How can Audit Scotland make a recommendation that they need to involve elected members in the governance review? Yeah, here we are with an officer dictating terms about that governance review is going to be with no elected member oversight. And that was the very same meeting where I'll play the video in relation to the actual meeting itself on the podcast, is when the officer and the leader of the council had enough of my shenanigans and basically asking really, really horrible questions with regards to how this council conducts its democratic duty. And really, in effect, what I then got was the monitoring officer leaning over to the leader of the council, unprompted, uninvited, and interfere in a political process where she turns around to him and says, "Do you want his mic muted?"
Councillor Lennon.
The mic disabled.
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 Chair, it's a point of order's been raised. I've already asked you have the...
You could not make...
To that effect.
You could not... I mean, I'm going to play the video anyway, so I'm sure I've got... creative freedom in relation to that, and I look forward to the Standards Commission coming forward at a later date as well. But the point that makes me laugh is, Jerry, is the hypocrisy that exists in relation to them being triple wide and being warned to get a governance review done, and them trying to slip that on the agenda, a policy and strategy, and putting that forward. And then when a legitimate amendment was put forward, because so we get asked a question, how do normal people go to a full council meeting? Can they ask questions at that full council? Can they do this? Can they do that? Well, let's be honest about it. We had a petitions process, and that petitions process was meant to give the people in North Lanarkshire the right to reply. They could start a petition and ask a question and basically make their disdain known to elected officials and officers in North Lanarkshire Council. And as part of that governance review, that was part of it. But what did we do with that? We completely shut down any due process because it wasn't worth the back of the fag packet it was written on. So we've incorporated that into the governance review. And again, in that governance review, Jerry, how are the people going to be communicated with? How are elected members going to be able to take a petition and stand up for the electorate on that? Well, nobody knows, because this is going to take 2 years to write. And again, no councillor involvement.
Why is it 2 years?
Well, we've already done the research, our own research into this, and it's quite clear that officers will be brought in at the very end to vote it through. So there's no information about how the role that officers will play. The project sponsor, by the way, for this is the Chief Officer of Legal and Democratic Services.
The author.
The author of the report.
Yeah.
Project will be managed by one of that officer's staff.
Yeah, Audit Scotland has highlighted the fact that there has to be more elected member involvement in the governance of the council, yet you exclude them for any co-production. It is absolutely staggering the level of, I wouldn't even call it stupidity, I'd call it disdain that officers have in relation to elected members.
Elected members will be involved, and it is very, very vague about the involvement. They'll be involved in various aspects of this review that's to take place. What's not mentioned in it by the project sponsor in the report is what happens if there is disagreement? What happens if elected members disagree with either a proposal or a recommendation on that report, and who will hold sway on it? None of that information is available, so there's no information for elected members to enter this review having any idea about conflict resolution, the principal role that they're going to play, who'll be an arbiter.
The drawing of lots if an agreement can't be reached. Is there something like that in there, Jerry? No.
None of that.
Right.
And it makes the commentary of Audit Scotland all the more.
I just can't believe the hypocrisy that they say you need a governance review, get your elected members more involved, and then they write the report and exclude a member for asking any legitimate questions on co-production.
You had a motion to bring forward to that. Now, generally speaking, people, the good people of North Lanarkshire and beyond who listen to this, as happens at every council meeting, a paper is brought forward and that paper is read, right? Even if there's an amendment or an alternative proposal, that paper is read before any amendment
by the officer presenting the report, the chief officer presenting the report. Yeah.
And the leader of the council broke that convention. Whether he planned to do so or not is really a question only he himself can answer.
Well, they also moved on as well, Jerry, past the agenda item without taking any recommendation for it. So they broke the standard process for that as well.
You did, and you brought forward a motion. Your amendment was brought out. There was a whole sort of shenanigans going on about whether or not it was deemed to be competent or not. There was some comments made by the leader, the opposition leader of the SNP while we were in a 15-minute recess or whatever it was. But in the end, you got kicked out of that. So before we even got to hear the report. This report.
Well, still to hear that report. Still to hear about it.
Sorry, the governance review is something that has been proposed by Audit Scotland.
Yes, and it was never proposed just by an officer. It wasn't an officer's job to take that forward. It should have been something that was co-produced. It should have been elected members. Anyway, I don't want to dwell because the Audit Scotland report has got significant amounts that we still need to cover. But in addition to that as well, because I think it's really important for the people in North Lanarkshire to understand, because this is such a dry subject matter, how we've ended up here. This is basically it. Back in 2020, when the pandemic, and others can call me a conspiracy theorist, I'm quite happy to take that charge. But my experience, lived experience is in 2020 when the COVID pandemic hit, we ended up in a position, a delegated authority under Gold Command structures, meaning North Lanarkshire Council was run by officers and elected members effectively gave up their rights to scrutinise at that point, which is fair enough. Fast forward, those powers were reluctantly given back, but what we've seen was an erosion in those powers coming back. And the leader of the council, who was asleep at the wheel, had allowed for the powers to be passed more and more and more to officers. And now where do we end up? We end up in a position where people in North Lanarkshire have basically voted a turkey for Christmas, because ultimately that is what this leader is. He is sitting there doing absolutely hee-haw, getting rewarded handsomely, £66,000 per year he receives as a remuneration for being the leader in North Lanarkshire, and all his pals get all the money as well, and enhanced payments for taking on committee roles and responsibilities, and none of them do anything because it all has to go back through the chief executive, even the agenda design, everything, because that's in delegated authority. So everything all goes through the chief executive of the council under delegated authority, and I'm not blaming the chief executive at all, but it comes down to the fundamental aspect that this is all the responsibility of the leader of the council. So when you get told later on, start of next year, that your council tax isn't 10%, it's potentially 12% it's gone up by, and see the following year definitely gone up by another minimum of 10% then as well, and potentially higher as the years go on, then you know who to firmly blame, because ultimately vote Labour, get taxed. That's it.
Seems to be the case. People do need to be be aware as well, just before Big Dave jumps back in, because I know we've sidelined him a wee bit, but there is a review underway in the Scottish Parliament on council tax and whether or not a fundamental shift is going to be undertaken. So we'll keep you updated with that as that progresses through the Parliament.
Well, it's just a couple of points that I'm going to pick up on really quickly, so we'll be stopping for a break and then you're getting the finishing gambit in this, David, so you can come in with whatever points that you want. Audit Scotland's report also highlights financial control is making long-term risk. And what does that mean when it's at home? Well, the council posted a £12.2 million underspend for 24-25. The contingency reserve is just 8 million, under 1% of the annual spend, with no clear rationale. So again, we're looking at creative accounting in relation to what it is, and this again was highlighted by Audit Scotland. Let's look at the other things. Weak scrutiny of senior decisions, trading operations missing legal targets. The council's significant trading operation failed to meet its legal break-even duty for the third year running. If this were a private business, it wouldn't be tolerated, but residents are carrying the risk. And the unavoidable conclusion basically coming off, in fact, I've even touched upon that either. I went and left that paper down. Let's go to that. Public satisfaction has collapsed. 73% satisfaction indicators declined in the last year alone. Since that base, like this makes me laugh all the time, 91% of satisfaction indicators have deteriorated. North Lanarkshire has slipped into the bottom two councils in its family group for recent improvement. Audit Scotland confirms what people already feel. Services don't feel better, they feel worse. And then we get to other services sliding. Environmental services, well, again, everybody can see outside that your grass is no longer getting cut, your bin cycles are all being reduced, and even these big black bins that were seen as the saviour, taking away your poo bins and various other things, well, they don't get as emptied as often. So again, Audit Scotland highlights decline in performance in the most recent year. Culture and leisure services indicators declining since the base year. That's quite staggering. And community boards falling overall attendance. Well, no wonder, because community boards have no decision making authority. It doesn't even have as much as £1 to spend locally. So you're asking people to come along, attend these on a Wednesday night, be in a rain, and basically when you get in there, it's the same complaints you've been raising since the 2 years have passed for the establishment of community boards. This is no a lack of strategic direction. I could bang my head off this desk right now at the level of madness, because do you know why, David? That old choo-choo train needs to be protected. The gravy train, woo-woo, it's coming in for the station.
Well, it does, but you know...
AC Jones at the wheel.
That's that.
You know, the real sad thing about this is that people would never find this stuff out. It's never publicised. It's never engaged with elected members to actually
it's usually curtailed into McMafias and various other things in North Lanarkshire.
Just a couple of points, because you've covered an awful lot of the stuff that I had down there as well. We go back to that section 10 where it says effectively it's a heavily officer-led council, and the strong recommendation is that there's a process that is put in place for engaging with members for the programme of work. That has to happen.
Well, that hasn't happened.
So it's like they've recognised the fact that members have been sidelined and are not as actively involved in scrutiny or decision making that they should be. So that's a strong recommendation. We need to pick that one up.
Should we have sorry to interrupt you, but should we be demanding, because we're elected members, you, Jerry, and I are elected members, should we be demanding a leadership review right now? Is that what we should be doing? Now, I'm not calling for a vote of no confidence in the man, because he ultimately has to have the right to reply. But let's look at a cross-party leadership review led by elected members to see whether or not his leadership is fit for purpose. Because if he's deteriorated every responsibility for an elected member and handed that to officers, then that's a reneging of power. Why are you getting paid £66,000 a year, pal?
Yep, I mean, take the personality out of that, because effectively you've got the position. So if you talk about the position of a leader of a council that's the fourth largest council in Scotland, is that that's not going to be an easy gig.
No,
but by the same
certainly
token,
not.
if you hand over everything that you've got to make difficult decisions to somebody else, then you've got a problem. So is there a review? There has to be a review about the process as to why that's happened. There has to be a review as to the extent to which this delegation of authority has moved across to officers. Now, let's not forget that they've got the experience and knowledge and everything else that's there, the expertise in some of these areas. But the system dictates that.
But they're not necessarily right, David.
No, they're not. And that's why I'm
They're
saying
not
that
necessarily
the safeguard or the safety net is that elected members are there to scrutinise, to question, to challenge, to support, to disagree.
9 community boards
Because-
exist across North Lanarkshire. How effective have these community boards been? Now, granted, Cumbernauld will argue we are highly effective in our local area, but take a look at the other 8.
Yeah.
Again, the other 8, what's the systematic process for them to make change locally? And yet, we're spending hundreds of millions of pounds on community hubs that nobody asked for. I appreciate that schools need upgraded, I appreciate all these different things, but nobody asked for community hubs. I don't ever recall being part of a process where community hubs were identified as the model that we need to execute in North Lanarkshire for our financial security in the future.
Part of the plan for North Lanarkshire.
Yeah, but
wasn't
it's part of that.
much
But again, what was the
strategic.
input in relation to elected members to that plan? Point that I would make here is again coming back to, if your 2% council tax revenue is being allocated towards this, which will be higher again, probably 3-4% now, to cover the cost of borrowing, then really in effect, if community boards were sitting with that, the level of investment that could take place across this authority, and local things, if you want speed bumps, you can get speed bumps. Imagine a community board having the authority to say, do you know what, I'm not happy with this road, I want speed bumps put in, and it can make that change. Festive lighting, oh my goodness, we could have festive lighting back. Oh, do you know what, here's a crazy idea. See the existing assets that North Lanarkshire currently has, why don't we invest a wee bit of money in them and bring them up to commercial standard, have them competing with your pure gyms and other people.
Well, you talk about commercial assets, and I know you want to move on this there, but another part of that policy the Audit Scotland documents is there, is talking about the incorrect valuation of council assets. So
Incorrect valuation.
There has to be, I think it said annually, but there has to be a regular reassessment of all the assets held within a Scottish local authority, and that talks about land and buildings in the estate and everything else that's there. And they mentioned on the report effectively that was incorrect, that it had been recorded incorrectly. Now, I don't know yet the implications of that, because effectively in bookkeeping terms you could put it one way and then the other side of the book it could rebalance itself out. So that, but it's just another indicator to think, well, what is it that we're actually arriving at with this? You know, these indicators I mentioned earlier, 28 health indicators.
You're the only person that's seen.
I'm the only person that's seen. I posted it up because it's charts and graphs, but it's actually well, for sad person like me, it's actually quite interesting to look at the figures. But one of the things that's also mentioned in that report, these are core to how the council operate and what services and etc. that they provide, and also the strategic planning that's going forward. And yet within that Audit Scotland document is that they were criticised, but effectively they just don't publish these figures. So one of the comments was that people in North Lanarkshire can't actually go and look at the performance as to how well North Lanarkshire are doing, because the council just decided we're not actually going to publish these 28 health indicators for anybody to have a look at. They are there if you go digging in the deep dark web and find from there. But anyway, we're coming
to a break now. We'll be back on TikTok Live after these short songs, and on that we're going to continue on the governance aspects of the council, because recently we all went independent. And as part of that process, there has to be a political balance recalculation. And lo and behold, El Presidente again is going to be the decision maker at full council, with all his pals deciding on what 16 elected independent members, what committees they'll sit on. My goodness, we talk about governance, we talk about structural review, then we get to that, you couldn't make it up. Anyway, we will be back after this short break.
There's no input on that, nor do I wish to have any input on that. And I imagined naively, David, that it would be a similar situation for the 16 independent councillors, because the 16 independent councillors make up 21% of the council, and therefore they have 21% representation on each council committee. And surely, in the adult world where adults are in control, those 16 individuals decide for themselves through a democratic process, a meeting, for example, and then a vote. They decide among themselves who is going to be representing that group of independent or sole party councillors at council committees. That's how I would see it. And I think if there's intervention from any external politician or indeed an officer to play a role in that, then I think something is badly wrong. And I think it would look really dreadful if an external individual, perhaps the leader of the administration, was to vote to handpick individuals who perhaps are already sitting in paid roles as conveners, but who sit as independents. Then that would look very bad indeed. Not very democratic either.
I think, well, you guys will know that I've actually emailed the leader of the council and the head of Legal and Democratic, just very similarly, Jerry, on that basis. Because what you could end up with here is that if the default position that they're trying to put forward results in decisions being taken by full council as to how these 16 individuals are allocated towards committees, then it's absolutely catastrophic, because what you're going to end up with is that Labour plus the paid help will determine which councillors sit on which committees, and effectively to stop scrutiny, to stop questioning, and to make sure that the votes are in the right place. Now, that in any democratic society just can't take place. I mean, if you allow something like that to take place, and you've got 16 members who are given their jobs, if you like, by Jim Logue's administration and those that support for whatever reasons support, then you end up with a whole balance of the council that just is non-representative. You've just then got the whole council and committee structure controlled by Jim Logue's Labour administration. And that's the very points that I've raised with both of them today, and I've asked for an urgent meeting, because that just does not stack up.
Well, it comes back to the Audit Scotland report. All this stems back to the Audit Scotland report for me, because if he decides what committees, so let's say for talking sake, every committee is important in North Lanarkshire, right? But there is certain committees that are more political than committees that are just more operational and functional. So let's take, for talking sake, licensing board. Is it important that you have licensing measures in place? Of course it is. Planning committee, is it important that these things are in existence? Of course it is. But policy and strategy is the key political committee that exists within North Lanarkshire Council. If you don't allow any of us, you, Jerry, me, anybody, Big Paul, doesn't matter who it is, not to be on that committee, then you've not got the same level of scrutiny in that committee, the main political committee where the main decisions all are, because that's what then goes to full council. So ultimately what he's done is take the Audit Scotland report, no looked at that, no read that, and quite happy for that gravy train to continue, because this is all about the dilution of scrutiny in North Lanarkshire.
Yep, you're going to end up...
You've read about the Monkland scandal, you've read about all these different things, and I think our problem is, if there is not proper oversight for elected members, then really in effect we're heading down another one of these darky rabbit holes, that dark rabbit holes that's going to lead us into a position.
Let's be fair, that Audit Scotland's already confirmed in this report there is no oversight. No. There is no proper scrutiny or oversight that's been afforded to elected members that's there, and they are recommending that there's a shift towards that. They're recommending that there's a programme put in place for elected member engagement, and they see, for an external body to actually make comments like that, they must have concerns about this basis of the unelected or the elected representation not being heard within North Lanarkshire Council at all. That's a serious concern for them to put that on paper. But the other thing they put forward, it's quite interesting, because each of the committees obviously carry a certain number of elected members that's involved, that's there. And we were presented with an email from one of the officers, which was actually quite helpful, because it broke down each of the individual committees. But where it fell short was instead of saying you've got 5 allocated spaces available there, you've got 6 here, you've got 9 there, you've got 2 there, or whatever else it is for these respective committees, it's stated there are so many vacancies within these committees because other independent elected members just happen to be sitting on them already. Well, sorry, no, that doesn't stack up, because effectively when you have a change of the political balance within council, is that has to be reset. So why should I be disadvantaged or picked upon on the basis of not being able to sit on, I don't know, finance committee or whatever, one that I feel that my career and past experience suits better than somebody that just happened to be there before.
You remember you're the only person that's took a test for the finance committee.
Aye, well,
that again should qualify you there and then.
But you know what I mean?
Consider the convener at that time still had they took his test.
But why would an officer put out effectively saying that these are the vacancies? Within standing orders, there's no term of vacancies. What they're talking about is committee composition. So there are 5 or there are 10 or there are 15 places or whatever it happens to be. That's the number. Not that there are vacancies because somebody happens to be sitting on it already by virtue of the fact that they were left a political group or they were already independent or whatever else. It has to be a total reset from it.
We've covered a lot tonight, especially for the Audit Scotland report, now into the anti-democratic process that currently exists in North Lanarkshire Council. You mentioned a word there, and I think it's important that we explain that to the good folks at home, and that's standing orders. Now, standing orders are the rules in which councillors are abiding by in relation to any governance or anything at all that's happening in council. It's how we conduct ourselves, it's the order of business, it's these different things, and these are basically the main rules that govern us as elected members.
Rules of engagement.
Rules of engagement. So that is the most important thing. So when it comes to any decision about committee allocation or anything at all like that, it has to be within standing orders, because standing orders is ultimately going to be the thing that everybody can rely on to be the sort of piecemealiness to reference, to say, well, do you know what, that's in standing order, so it has to be accurate, that's what's been agreed. But what we're finding is absolutely none of this is in standing orders. They're using legalese, and I think there's a danger here of officers encroaching again in the political sphere, because ultimately what we have is officers basically dictating that if that isn't decided, it will go back to full council. Again, we've got the email, but we had a briefing document as well sent out, but that get quickly changed. So the process is a wee bit clearer now, that they want it to go back to full council for elected members to decide. And for a group in a political group, like you says, I can't influence the SNP's decisions for committees. I can't influence Labour Party's decision. Why should they get to influence mine? Surely the most democratic way of dealing with that would be get the 16 together and tell them, do you know what, if you can't decide amongst yourself for 5 going for policy and strategy, then there's a vote that's got to be taken. Surely that would be the most logical conclusion in that. But again, it comes back to North Lanarkshire. And the point that I would make here is, I remember El Presidente, Jim Logue, make an allegation in the Duma when it came to the £1.8 billion Mears contract. They are conspiracy theorists, they're splinters, all because we performed the task of scrutiny. And I remember getting kicked out the council that day because I kept putting forward a point of order. And the point of order was in relation to Jim Logue not accepting the fact that others are actually doing due diligence. And the point that I would make here now is that Audit Scotland report has vindicated absolutely every
Does that
element.
make them conspiracy theorists?
Every aspect, because ultimately if he's calling us conspiracy theorists, then Audit Scotland have to be conspiracy theorists
That'd
as
be an
well.
interesting point.
Let's ask him that question at full council. I think that's a point of order, Jim. We're coming for you with that one. We'll ask you what your
Would
view
you consider Audit Scotland to be conspiracy theorists?
Yeah. So, future of the council and the makeup of the council. So, we're waiting on this governance review. It's going to take a year and a bit to come out, which was told to them to get done for Audit Scotland. But as I said again, the relationship breakdown that seems to appear now in regards to senior officers and elected members and all these different things, just because performative tasks are being done, I find that bureaucracy is being utilised and weaponised here. And again,
this is seamless. This is seamless. What a prompt you've just given me there along that lines, and we're running out of time. But just in terms of that whole the whole argument about governance, good governance, right, and powers delegated to authorities that run out of control almost on an annual basis. More power is given away to officers, and there's good reasons why we shouldn't have as much delegation, right? And one of the biggest criticisms is that it makes officers rather than councillors the primary decision makers on a huge range of issues. It creates a complete disconnect between the public, elected members, and constituents find that their local councillor has limited power to do anything on their behalf. That leads to a lack of transparency. It feels like an over-centralisation of power, and ultimately a reduced role for your councillors. I know councillors that feel their role's been reduced to casework and complaints rather than any kind of strategic leadership or role to play in terms of scrutiny. So here's some of my proposals for this review, right? The focus should be on delegating powers only those functions that are truly routine and have minimum community impact, and that's like small decisions around planning, building warrants, all the licensing and stuff like that for taxi drivers. We need to establish call-in powers for councillors as well, empowering councillors to call in delegated decisions for review by a committee that's powerful and has a mechanism for increasing that scrutiny. That would apply to any delegated decision that a councillor believes is either politically sensitive, has a significant local impact, or a financial implication even above £500, for example. So by implementing these changes, North Lanarkshire Council can strike a better balance between efficiency and democracy, ensuring that the public can have confidence in their elected representatives, their elected councillors, rather than being under the impression that non-elected individuals are making decisions on their behalf.
I just come back to the point that when you elect a councillor in North Lanarkshire, you think you're electing somebody to stand up for your local area. And really, in effect, I come back to that point. If that elected member's castrated before they can even get into a committee chamber to raise any points of significance, because the game is so skewed. When did you get told about the bureaucratic methods that get executed nearer by the officer class or councillors with regards to committee structures, etc.? There is no one-size-fits-all training induction manual for this. Again, trickery and games are played all the time, and that's fair enough. That's politics. But when there's things that you see professionally that just don't add up, then surely there should be a mechanism that exists. And I agree with you, Jerry, there should be a recall vote. Members should have the ability to recall. But what should also happen as well is the leader of a minority group should not be able to pay opposition members. He should not be allowed to pay opposition members, because ultimately what you then have is the allegations that could easily be made that there is an anti-democratic process in existence that is basically absolutely ski-whiff to ensure that there's any meaningful opposition. That is absolutely bonkers, the fact that he pays opposition. Yeah, the incentive is no longer I'm there to represent my community. My incentive is now I'm there to fill my pockets.
Yeah,
absolutely bonkers.
I mean, I've said it from the beginning. Any administration that has enough competent individuals within their political group should be in the key positions. They should not be contracting that out. Here's
that's what I was going to say. There's the bit that for those at home
that they control in other areas.
Well, that's the bit for those at home. Your council tax money is effectively paying an additional 14 grand to these individuals to be conveners, and these individuals who are representing you, not just you, the full authority. And in effect, they can't even design an agenda for council business. They have to go through a senior manager of the council to basically decide what is effectively going to be on the agenda for that committee. How dare they? How dare they decide that? If I want to raise a matter I want it on the agenda, I should be free to be able to get that put on the agenda. Not have a refusal coming back for a chief officer of legal and democratic services. Again, the system is rigged. I would say that. I would safely say that. And I would say, in addition to that as well, I look forward to my standards complaint that will no doubt be winging its way, because ultimately what I think we've done tonight, gentlemen, is those political opponents of yours who listen to this show hopefully have received an education, because ultimately, do you think they'll be able to comprehend the Audit Scotland report? Do you think they'll be able to comprehend how the internal workings and minutiae of the council operates? Well, I'd like to think we shined a wee bit of a light on that tonight. Anyway, Jerry, thanks very much for joining us, and I know you're no well tonight, so it's greatly appreciated you've managed to make the time. I'd like to have a closing remark, Jerry. Have you any closing remarks before we go?
Only that it's been an extraordinary pleasure.
Yeah, I've missed it. And Davy Crichton, our old pal Jerry, will be back half in the sick next week, because he's out late tonight.
Looking forward to it.
He's out late tonight. So, but again, Davy, thank you so much for joining us.
Very
it's greatly
welcome.
appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been What's the Point? Again, I would reiterate, we'll post up how you can register to attend this Audit Scotland meeting, and I would really encourage everybody to basically log on to that as a virtual meeting, so you'll be able to see everything and hear everything that's getting said, because it's extremely important that you understand how Jim Logue is running this council. And in addition to that as well, full council's next week, next Thursday, is it?
The 18th, yeah.
On the 18th, and that'll be a live webcast. And if you want an absolute scream, log on to that as well to see how anti-democratic North Lanarkshire Council truly is. We'll put a link up for that as well. We can't wait to see you next week again. Yes.
It's it could possibly be one of the ones if you're bursting to the toilet just before it starts.
Aye, make sure your camera's off. Make sure your camera's off.
No, just wait. Because it might only last 6 minutes.
Oh, we've already got it timed. It will be 4.5 minutes. But anyway, that's your prediction. Jerry, have a lovely night. Davey, have a lovely night. And you at home, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
I can fly.